The world's strongest hunter challenged a rookie, then fell beneath his sword. Terry's shadow clones had never failed, but Shin broke through them. Earlier, veterans called Shin disposable because he awakened at level 1. They could not see 50 years of combat behind his face. His exclusive skill turned eaten artifacts into permanent stats and abilities. Regression finally taught him how to use that absurd power immediately. His first consumed dagger granted agility and a boss-stopping stun. That meal began the climb that forced the #1 woman down. Her clones, speed, and assassination technique had dominated every previous challenger before Shin appeared. The final collision was visible across the city, turning a private test into an unmistakable reversal. Captain Yoon had selected him precisely because nobody important would object if the rookie disappeared. Shin remembered monsters, player betrayals, rare drops, and the coming disasters that had ruined his world. Each absorbed effect could also combine with another, letting weak functions evolve into deadly chains. His younger body gained an advantage no ordinary regression could provide: the correct artifact route. The dagger itself disappeared forever, establishing the permanent cost behind every future power increase. Before reaching Terry, he would overturn dungeons, guild expectations, and several deaths fixed in history. In his first life, Shin awakened with Devour Artifact, but had no idea what the command actually meant. No description accompanied the exclusive ability, leaving him to mistake a system command for literal eating. Frying a magical weapon in an ordinary pan accomplished nothing except making his apartment smell like burned metal. Even biting the item directly only hurt his teeth and deepened the humiliation surrounding his awakening. Years passed while he carried supplies through weak dungeons and watched talented players leave him behind. Carrying other players' loot showed him thousands of treasures without granting the strength to claim any. He finally discovered the gap of consciousness at 40, long after his competitors had built overwhelming leads. Discovering the method so late explained why his growth had remained mediocre despite exceptional innate skill. Inside that mental space, artifacts appeared as prepared dishes that his body could actually absorb. The dish reflected an artifact's nature, though the resulting cuisine could range from delicious to horrifying. Every meal destroyed the original item, but permanently preserved selected stats or abilities, without its normal restrictions. Mana costs, weight burdens, and awkward activation penalties could weaken after absorption while useful functions remained. Shin spent the rest of that life learning battles, systems, future disasters, and exactly which artifacts mattered. That accumulated knowledge became more valuable than his old level once the clock returned to the beginning. Then a mysterious book carried a regression effect and returned him to the apartment of his younger self. The familiar room, younger hands, and unchanged date confirmed the book had truly rewritten his position. The body was weak again, but his memory still contained decades of swordsmanship and painful mistakes. Regaining power required rebuilding stats, but technique already lived inside every practiced movement. He immediately grabbed a low-rank venomous dagger and entered the gap before history could move forward. The system announced preparation rather than failure, confirming that his younger self possessed the same exclusive ability. Instead of metal, the dagger became roasted chicken glistening with oil, a far kinder menu than expected. Relief mattered because Shin knew future artifacts could manifest as dishes far less pleasant than finishing it permanently added 2 agility points and the active control skill called Demon Bash. Demon Bash offered control instead of raw damage, exactly what a physically weak regressor needed first. The dagger vanished, confirming that every future meal would require a real sacrifice rather than free duplication. Losing equipment was acceptable only when the acquired effect provided more value than using or selling it. Shin accepted that price because artifacts sitting in storage could now become pieces of his own body. This calculation would guide every purchase, reward choice, and battle over the following weeks. His first target was Dungeon 85, where a rare crimson stone would appear from the middle boss. He joined Yoon's squad specifically to reach that boss before history placed the treasure elsewhere. In the previous timeline, Shin's party failed there, allowing another team to claim its valuable delay effect. Delay seemed minor alone, but Shin already understood how it could multiply a stun beyond normal limits. Captain Yoon unexpectedly promoted the newly awakened porter into his raid team, pretending to recognize hidden promise. The promotion angered porters, who had spent years waiting for a player position of their own. In private, Yoon described Shin as a convenient sacrifice who could die before any useful member did. Yoon also expected the rookie's death to silence complaints about unfair contribution and work distribution. The other porters resented the promotion, while veteran players mocked the giant sword Shin had studied alone. Shin claimed online videos taught him the great sword, an explanation too ridiculous to invite deeper questions. None of them knew he had already swung similar weapons through more fights than their combined careers. His calm posture looked like arrogance to veterans, who measured ability only through current level. Yoon ordered the rookie to remain near the entrance, while the experienced members handled the orcs ahead. The captain wanted Shin present as insurance, not active enough to earn a meaningful reward share. That plan collapsed when one ordinary orc nearly overpowered a senior shield-bearer and forced Yoon to intervene. The senior's shield and confidence both failed against the creature's superior size and weight. Yoon required several attacks to kill it, revealing how badly his team had underestimated the dungeon's physical monsters. Even Yoon stood at only level 50, far weaker than the image he cultivated before his subordinates. A larger pack appeared immediately afterward, and the captain ordered a retreat, rather than risk being surrounded. Retreat would surrender the contribution Shin needed, so he volunteered before fear could disperse the team. Shin walked forward instead, cut down the first attacker, and used footwork learned across decades to avoid the rest. The first clean kill made the pack furious and drew every remaining weapon toward him. One swing followed another, until the floor held an entire pack that should have stopped beginner players cold. Experience turned their simple patterns into predictable openings, compensating for the weakness of level 1. The armored orc resisted his ordinary blade, so Shin activated Demon Bash and stole its movement for 2 seconds. The skill interrupted movement rather than overpowering armor, allowing correct timing to bypass a defensive gap. That opening put the monster on the ground and showed every witness that Shin's control skill worked above his level. Yoon understood that even famous players rarely held a target as long as this supposed beginner. The victory raised him, awarded the Fearless Ichor Puppy title, and added 5 valuable points of evasion. Titles created permanent passive advantages, making unusual early achievements another route to accelerate growth. His available stat point went directly into luck, the attribute his older self had learned never to neglect. Shin had learned too late that luck influenced much more than treasure chests or random numbers. Higher luck could improve rare drops, strange activations, and the chance of finding exactly the artifact he needed. It also improved critical outcomes and several hidden chances attached to artifact effects. Yoon inspected Shin's faded greatsword, searching for a hidden diamond item that could explain the massacre. Yisun expected some expensive weapon to be doing the work because accepting superior talent felt worse. The weapon was completely ordinary, leaving skill and experience as the only explanations Yoon refused to believe. His frustration deepened after remembering he had spent 2 years without obtaining an equivalent control skill. Shin then challenged the contribution rule, demanding the Crimson Stone if he personally defeated the demon orc. Contribution determined ownership, so the challenge used Yoon's own rules against any attempt to seize the drop. Yoon agreed only after attaching a condition. His own party would receive the first attempt against the middle boss. The captain expected the demon orc to die before Shin received permission to approach it. False market information convinced Yoon that the bloodthirsty demon orc would be easier than the monsters outside. Market notes described a manageable boss, but they omitted its true strength and dangerous regeneration. He charged confidently, got hammered into the ground, and ordered everyone away before the second blow finished him. Shin recognized the same reckless formation that had caused the party's defeat in his former life. Shin entered alone because he remembered the creature's habits, regeneration, and the exact treasure inside its body. The creature's low vision created escape routes, yet the Crimson Stone required defeating it rather than surviving. Raw stats favored the boss, but the experienced swordsman redirected its axe and waited for its posture to open. He did not need to win every collision, only guide the heavier weapon into exploitable positions. Demon Bash landed, yet regeneration broke the stun early and left the ability unavailable for 15 seconds. A failed control chain forced him to survive the cooldown with footwork and blade placement alone. Rather than panic, Shin focused every ounce of power on one weak point and used the orc's momentum against it. Concentrating force prevented his weak body from wasting power against the boss's entire reinforced frame. His blade finally passed through, killing the boss and awarding 2 levels plus the Demon Hunter title. Solo contribution also improved title opportunities that would have been diluted inside a group victory. That title accelerated regeneration fivefold, a reward that would later keep him alive during much deadlier fights. Faster regeneration immediately addressed damage that his low health pool could not afford to retain. Shin protected Yoon's authority by claiming the captain had already weakened the boss before his finishing attack. The lie prevented Humiliation from turning Yoon into an enemy before the more dangerous final room. Yoon accepted the rescue to his reputation and honored the agreement by leaving the Crimson Stone behind. Preserving face gave the captain a reason to cooperate, rather than dispute an agreement witnesses had heard. The silver artifact became meat jelly inside the gap, with a base absorption rate of 20%. Higher-ranked artifacts transferred larger portions of their attributes, making silver the first meaningful test. It added strength, health, and delay, an effect capable of extending another skill through repeated activations. Delay did not create a new attack. It changed how long an existing condition could control combat. Shin bound Delay to Demon Bash, allowing the first stun to trigger another before the original duration expired. The first extension was reliable, while each later repetition became progressively less certain. Later extensions carried falling probabilities, but even a reliable 4-second stop could decide an entire boss fight. Shin therefore treated the chain as an advantage, not an infinite guarantee he could trust blindly. Yoon abandoned the pretense of superiority and invited Shin to cooperate against the dungeon's orc berserker. Cooperation let Yoon preserve leadership, while Shin decided the timing that actually mattered. The final boss had lower skill resistance, making it the perfect target for Shin's freshly combined controllability. Experience with boss resistance told him exactly why this target would demonstrate delay more cleanly. His opening slash staggered the creature. Then Demon Bash locked it down while the entire party attacked together. 4 controlled seconds gave weaker teammates enough time to pour every available attack into one target. Dungeon 85 cleared before the Berserk could recover, earning Shin the D-rank overwhelming power title. The clear also transformed Porter's resentment into competition over who might support Shin personally. Its effect lengthened every status condition by 10%, turning the stun combination into an even harsher prison. Small percentage extensions became decisive when applied to repeated stuns, freezes, or silence effects. Yun paid a large bonus and handed over a bronze berserker ring because Shin had carried the operation. Yun admitted the item was not valuable enough to keep, disguising genuine respect beneath practical bluntness. One jealous teammate named Soul watched this exchange, contacted criminals, and asked them to remove both men. Soul interpreted that generosity as betrayal after years of service and turned jealousy into attempted murder. Back home, Shin studied the ring's lightweight effect and the crushing mana cost that made it undesirable. The ring normally consumed 1 mana each second, merely to reduce the total weight of equipped artifacts. Devouring erased that ongoing cost while preserving a reduced passive effect, making every equipped artifact weigh almost nothing. Absorption cut the strength of lightweight, but reduced every carried artifact to only 100 grams. His great sword suddenly moved like a training stick, proving that inconvenient penalties could become profitable meals. A massive blade now offered reach and power, without the usual stamina drain, restricting a beginner. After 3 days of practice, he also developed ambidextrous sword training and improved compatibility across several blade types. The passive training reward excluded certain blades, revealing that even useful skills arrived with boundaries. Shin drove towards Solo Dungeon 101, already aware that Soul's hired killers were following behind. A black vehicle remained behind him through the forest, confirming surveillance before the gate opened. The hyena pack entered after him with no healer, no mage, and a formation built for murdering players. Their composition favored overwhelming victims quickly and leaving before long battles demanded recovery. Shin offered one chance to leave, then warned that a dungeon was the easiest place to hide criminal bodies. Jante and his men laughed because they had entered many dungeons by turning cooperation into ambush. They attacked together, expecting their levels to crush him, but 2 men fell before the formation stabilized. Their surprise came from treating Shin's displayed level as a complete measurement of his current danger. Their archer fired repeatedly, while Shin cut through the arrows, closed the distance, and removed their ranged advantage. Throwing and retrieving the great sword disrupted the formation before close fighters could exploit the opening. Jante sacrificed his own allies as shields, confirming that greed rather than loyalty held the group together. The leader valued survival over comrades, making every body around him another disposable resource. Demon Bash froze the scarred leader for more than 4 seconds, reversing the predator's usual method against him. Delay stretched the control window, letting accumulated wounds punish the man before he could respond. Shin ended the threat, gathered 8 abandoned artifacts, and warned himself never to become comfortable with killing. The recovered equipment represented payment from attackers who had planned to harvest his body and organs. After consuming the haul, he reached level 10 with physical power comparable to a much more developed player. 11 total consumed artifacts raised health, mana, and several secondary attributes within days of awakening. 1 recovered ring could cleanse abnormal conditions, though repeated use within a minute sharply increased its mana cost. Shin had nearly relied on stun alone, so the cleanser corrected a weakness the hyenas exposed. The lesson was obvious. A single control skill could fail, so his future build needed answers for every condition. Layered defenses mattered, because future bosses would resist, cleanse, shorten, or completely ignore his preferred conditions. Inside the Goblin dungeon, Shin fought blind to complete the Lucky Day title's brutal 500 kill requirement. Closing his eyes created genuine danger, since one missed sound could end the attempt and his life together. Decades of battlefield awareness let him hear air shifts, dripping water, bowstrings, and footsteps without opening his eyes. Catching an arrow without sight showed that sharpened senses had become practical rather than theoretical. Goblin after goblin fell, until the title awarded 20 luck and incremental bonuses for hunting the same monster type. Repeated goblin kills eventually is the title's additional luck bonus to its allowed maximum. His luck soon crossed 100, strengthening every related effect and drawing attention from 3 watching constellations. Crossing 100 also granted a 10% enhancement to every function connected with that stat. The Cleaner of a Fallen Dimension admired cruelty, while the Pilgrim of Grand Space sensed unusual potential. Each patron offered a different path: destruction, sainthood, or improbable outcomes bending toward Shin. The third visitor was the Goddess of Luck, the same patron who once empowered a legendary miracle archer. Rumors described the miracle archer as incapable of missing and never running out of arrows. Shin remembered spending 10 lonely years waiting for one constellation in his first life and refused to rush. The late bloomer model student had reached him only after years of suffering in the previous timeline. He ultimately chose the goddess, accepting a contract that would remain effective for 30 years after death. Shin chose a patron aligned with the attributes central to Devour, drops, and future artifact quality. Friendly constellations congratulated him. Hostile ones threatened interference, and his new patron offered 4 extraordinary blessings. Celestial approval immediately increased his visibility across factions he had never encountered as a weak player. The choices included guaranteed critical hits, immediate high-grade activations, guaranteed boss drops, or doubled leveling gains. Every choice was powerful enough to shape an entire career, making the blessing itself another strategic burden. Shin selected the option that best supported future growth, then dismissed the 2 patrons he had rejected. His refusal told the Goddess of Luck that he intended to commit rather than collect divided loyalties. The Cleaner promised to take his head someday, proving that celestial attention could create enemies as easily as power. A constellation's resentment could eventually reach the physical world through contracted players or dimensional rules. Dungeon 101 ended against the Greed Goblin Lord, whose roar inflicted the will-breaking overwhelm condition. The boss's axes and shockwave prevented Shin from ending the chamber through ordinary close pressure. Recovery removed it immediately, giving Shin time to cut the boss and begin chaining Demon Bash through delay. The recovery ring proved its value immediately by deleting the condition, before lost morale controlled his movement. Each successful extension held the monster still, until one final sword stroke cleared the dungeon. Delay activated repeatedly, turning a chance-based system into enough time for a guaranteed finishing cut. The resulting rewards pushed his luck beyond 100 and provided a shield-carrying defense plus sacrifice. The Shield of Goodness looked ordinary, but its concealed protection would soon decide the wolf battle. That shield could restore him under a specific condition, though activating the protection would destroy it permanently. Choosing which body region sacrifice protected added another limitation Shin had to assign before danger arrived. Shin next sought money through a level 100 defense quest, despite being only level 17. He needed enough income for housing, equipment, and the steady supply of artifacts feeding his growth. The receptionist refused because solo players were barred from such quests for another 4 years. The rule blocked even confident veterans, so arguing about combat ability could not change the receptionist's decision. Kim Miso, an A-plus ranked sniper from Eden Guild, overheard the argument and offered to become his partner. Miso's wealth and famous family gave her influence, but her A-plus rank came from proven battle instinct. She was already famous as the first player to reach level 100 and heir to a powerful corporation. Her sniper title and public profile made the offer shocking to every player watching the exchange. Shin remembered being rejected by her team in his previous life, but he carried no interest in settling that history. Past rejection no longer mattered, because Shin's position and priorities had changed completely after regression. Miso wanted to test the confidence of a low-level player, choosing extermination over safer collection work. A normal player choosing this quest at level 17 would have been committing elaborate suicide. She agreed to support him while increasing her share for every monster he failed to kill himself. If too many targets escaped, her rising Simfris would eventually leave Shin with no reward. 300 wolves rushed their position, yet Shin's reach and efficient swings erased several with every movement. He controlled distance so each wide arc damaged several wolves without exposing his weaker body. Miso recognized polished defense, and energy control that no newly awakened swordsman should possess. The polished form reminded her of principles Eden's elite swordsman had spent years practicing. When the pack tightened, Demon Bash froze the entire wave long enough for Shin to cut through its center. 4 seconds of immobility converted an overwhelming numerical disadvantage into a sequence of helpless targets. A black wolf stunned him in return, but recovery removed the condition and exposed another impossible tool. Miso now knew Shin possessed both offensive control and a counter against enemy control. Shin defeated 299 wolves and earned no fear, protecting him from their specialized negative effects. Only the boss remained, meaning Shin had protected nearly the entire reward share he demanded. The final full moon Wolf Lord resisted Demon Bash and forced him into the first prolonged battle of the quest. Its resistance invalidated the easy pattern that had carried him through the ordinary pack. 30 years of remembered patterns let Shin anticipate its feints, but his current body still lost health rapidly. Knowledge identified attacks, but insufficient stamina made acting on that information increasingly costly. The wolf baited a counterattack, landed a crushing blow, and convinced Miso that her reckless partner had died. Her hesitation reflected guilt because she had agreed to watch rather than intervene until requested. Sacrifice destroyed the absorbed shield instead, restored Shin completely, and turned a fatal error into another opening. The shield vanished forever, confirming sacrifice could not rescue him from the same mistake twice. A damaged limb finally reduced the boss's resistance enough for Demon Bash to take hold on the third attempt. Injury changed the resistance calculation, demonstrating that conditions could be created rather than merely awaited. Miso arrived furious that he had hidden a healing option, then asked whether he was secretly living twice. Her joke landed dangerously close to reality, but she interpreted his experience as ranker-level talent. Shin concealed his alarm, finished the isolated boss, and earned Face-Off as his first C-rank title. Face-Off rewarded exactly the isolated duels his solo route kept creating. With no one else within 5 meters, Face-Off increased all his stats by 20% against a lone target. Speaking to Miso deactivated it, confirming that even a non-combatant inside the radius broke the condition. Miso surrendered her 5% reward share and called the decision an investment in future cooperation. She expected repeated cooperation to repay the small percentage far more effectively than immediate cash. The guaranteed boss drop produced a platinum blue moonstone, worth enough to change Shin's living conditions. Guaranteed drops from his blessing ensured bosses produced artifacts instead of leaving success to ordinary chance. Its lingering effect multiplied recovery beneath a full moon, adding another specialized layer to his expanding build. Beneath the right moon, regeneration could make prolonged canine battles overwhelmingly favorable to Shin. Guild recruiters surrounded him outside, but Miso pulled him away and privately offered membership in Eden. Other guild representatives immediately interpreted Miso's intervention as evidence Eden had claimed priority. Shin declined because rapid soulful growth mattered more than support. and past guild losses still controlled his choices. His previous small guild brought comfort, but its eventual losses also taught him the cost of dependence. Miso correctly guessed he intended to create something independent, then respected the answer without exposing his plans. Her negotiation mixed honesty, influence, and mutual benefit, without pretending the recruitment attempt was charity. The quest paid 500 million won, allowing Shin to move into a secure apartment inside Player Town. Security reduced the risk of criminals targeting a rising player, while nearby markets simplified artifact access. He had returned confused and directionless. But the speed of these victories revived an ambition his older self lost. For the first time in decades, youth felt like energy rather than a distant memory. Miso soon invited him into an unconfirmed four-person gate, where shifting terrain promised danger and first clear rewards. Unconfirmed gates changed routes and monsters between raids, making remembered guides useful, but never absolute. Before that raid opened, Shin purchased Yoon's worn artifacts, because long use could dramatically increase their absorption rates. Used equipment retained traces of its owner's habits, improving synchronization beyond the artifact's base percentage. An appraiser verified the trade, then watched Shin correct the captain's sword grip and identify trauma in his left side. The appraiser expected a purchase meeting, and instead witnessed a rookie instructing an experienced captain. Yoon had protected that shoulder so long that every right-handed attack exposed the weakness even more clearly. Fixing the habit required facing discomfort, rather than continuing to compensate around it. Shin changed the pressure of one finger, adjusted Yoon's breathing, and turned the feared position into usable support. Yoon felt immediate improvement despite pain, proving the advice came from practice rather than vague confidence. The lesson earned respect, while the purchased equipment promised multiple meals, with absorption rates approaching 90%. Shin paid 400 million won, because absorption quality mattered more than buying visually impressive gear. On the drive home, two Utopia Guild streamers blocked his car and threatened to burn him inside it. They were Yong Cho and Cho Shung-ho, players whose cruelty had become a profitable broadcast formula. Yong Cho and his cameraman built an audience by humiliating weak players, then hiding behind guild connections. Future crimes would eventually earn life sentences, but current popularity still protected their escalating behavior. The level 100 bully kicked Shin's car door apart and demanded a public one-on-one wager. Property damage turned an avoidable encounter into something Shin refused to settle with a warning. Shin accepted, adding 500 million won, and the loser's wrist after staring at the ruined vehicle. His wrist wager forced the bully to risk something personal, instead of hiding behind viewer attention. Their viewers pressured Yong Cho into agreeing, turning his planned humiliation stream into a contract he could not escape. Backing out after the live chat exploded would destroy Yong Cho's identity as an unbeatable enforcer. Training mode protected the plaza, as the bully used forced freezing to trap Shin inside a cage of ice. The ice trap looked decisive on camera because only specialized cleansing could remove its immobilizing effect. Recovery removed the condition before Yong Cho understood. His opponent possessed exactly the counter he feared. Kim Miso watched remotely and already expected this answer after witnessing recovery during their wolf quest. Shin also activated Psychedelic, a newly absorbed awakening skill that boosted recovery and several combat abilities. The absorbed meditation bracelet had carried the skill. With a rare activation, Shin's luck helped unlock. Its punishment was severe exhaustion if he suffered damage, so the match demanded nearly perfect movement. This drawback encouraged aggressive perfection, rewarding victory without allowing careless exchanges. Shin escaped behind Yong Cho, broke through every defense, and slammed the streamer into the training floor. Training protection saved Yong Cho from lethal damage, but could not protect his reputation or wager. The defeated man offered money immediately, but Shin still collected revenge for the car that had carried his new beginning. Shin's old car was already near mechanical death, yet watching the streamer destroy it still felt personal. Terror destroyed Yong Cho's public image more thoroughly than any edited video could ever repair. Even the bully's own followers saw him collapse, apologize, and lose control beneath the supposed newbie. Utopia manager Moon arrived for damage control, hoping compensation might convert an enemy into a recruit. Moon recognized recruitable talent where his guild members had seen only content for exploitation. Shin demanded 2 billion won for property damage and stress, forcing the guild to accept installments. The original demand had been lower until Shin priced the humiliation and disruption alongside repairs. Reporters crowded his apartment afterward, more interested in rumors about Miso than the abilities creating his victories. Shin rejected romantic speculation because survival preparation already consumed every waking hour. During 1 week of preparation, absorbed artifacts improved demon bash, dual wielding, blade handling, and full charging. High absorption from Yoon's used gear yielded several skills that new equipment could not have transferred efficiently. The last skill released concentrated movement energy, giving Shin a rapid approach that could amplify his sword attacks. Combined with telekinesis later, charging movement could eventually deliver the sword from unexpected directions. He remembered the great server breakdown coming in the future, and the people he had failed to protect. 20 years of preparation sounded generous, until Shin remembered how rapidly catastrophe overwhelmed unready players. Every upgrade now served a deadline, because merely repeating his former strength would repeat the same disaster. Strength without allies had failed before, so the rebuild also required changing relationships he once abandoned. Player magazine reporter Park Jong revealed that 5 foreign guilds had already requested official checks on Shin. Park advised caution because early foreign attention could hide recruitment, surveillance, or predatory targeting. That interest offered opportunities, but it also meant powerful organizations were measuring him. Before he understood their motives, Shin still preferred only one future affiliation, and none of the unknown groups had earned his trust. Near the unconfirmed gate, Miso introduced her elder sister Terry, Eden's shadow assassin, and Korea's strongest female hunter. Terry's hidden class created shadow clones and assassination techniques beyond ordinary national rankers. Terry immediately requested 5 exchanges to determine whether the famous rookie deserved her sister's attention. Miso objected because her sister's idea of testing routinely approached a real fight. Shin knew he could not win, yet accepted because pressure from an elite opponent could expose weaknesses safely. Measuring the gap directly provided more value than preserving pride through a polite refusal. Terry disappeared on the opening move and reappeared behind him, but the sword reached the attack in time. Blocking once surprised Terry, because her speed normally ended a match before opponents understood its direction. She increased her speed. Shin closed his eyes, followed air movement, and blocked a second strike through prediction. His second defense depended on accumulated experience rather than visual reaction that her movement could deceive. Terry recognized professional focus rather than beginner instinct, which made Shin nervous that she sensed his hidden history. She described his clarity as something most swordsmen developed only after prolonged combat. He traded the remaining exchanges for one attack at her highest safe speed and charged toward its predicted path. The request changed the exercise from a 5-move test into one meaningful measurement of his ceiling. Her shadow illusion activated by instinct, changing the angle and allowing her dagger hilt to strike his face. Training protection was absent, so instinctively activating the illusion prevented a potentially dangerous collision. Shin counted the loss as progress because Terry had needed a real skill against a body still far below hers. The failed counter also revealed how far his current attack prediction remained from Terry's adaptable movement. She promised a serious conversation later, while Shin quietly chose defeating her as another measurable goal. Unlike envy, a clear rival offered a direction he could pursue through repeated improvement. The gate team included Miso, Pyromancer Park Tesok, Space Wielder Kong Jui, and Shin on the front line. The team lacked a healer, making coordination and Jui's emergency escape especially important. Tesok's blue flame blessing protected everyone after the entrance, delivered them into the frozen hills of Frost Hell. Without fire protection, environmental cold alone could weaken them before any monster arrived. Jui opened spatial passages for emergency movement, while Miso's arrows supplied precision from long range. Their long partnership showed through prepared signals and backup plans, requiring almost no spoken explanation. Their first monster ambushed from behind, but Jui relocated the party before its fist crushed the formation. The first escape demonstrated why spatial support could preserve a formation that raw defense could not. Miso fired an arrow wrapped in Tesok's flame, blinding the target and creating Shin's path to its neck. Mixing flame with an arrow allowed Tesok and Miso to deliver 2 rolls through one attack. A coordinated portal placed Shin behind the creature, where Demon Bash and one clean cut ended it. Joey's second placement denied the monster a target, while giving Shin an undefended angle. The team learned that his value was not solo power alone. His decisions multiplied every specialized role around him. Reliable frontline protection freed ranged specialists to maximize damage rather than save abilities for emergencies. Against an armored demon ogre, Shin ordered Jui to open a portal directly in front of its strongest defense. The unusual order trusted his charging force to exploit the portal more effectively than attacking from outside. Full charging carried him through the opening, with enough force to split the armored body along its center. Armor designed for frontal impact could not distribute concentrated power, arriving at spatially compressed range. That result let Tassak use offensive magic freely, instead of spending every battle protecting an unreliable swordsman. Tessak's excitement reflected years spent limiting fire, because teammates could not safely create space. Deeper inside, they found the three-headed Cerberus of Frost Hell, sleeping beneath an exposed full moon. Shin had absorbed a lunar canine specialization, precisely for enemies falling within this broad creature category. Shin activated Time of Dogs and Wolves, a tidal effect that dominated canine monsters under lunar conditions. The visible moon provided full strength. Clouds would have weakened domination and changed the outcome. Cerberus recognized him as mightier and approached obedience, shocking companions who expected an immediate boss fight. Complete obedience would have transformed a boss into a temporary subordinate rather than an enemy. The gate would not progress while it lived, forcing Shin to kill a creature that had already submitted. Shin disliked destroying a willing creature, but the gate mechanism offered no alternate completion rule. Victory awarded reduction, which allowed him to have one selected cooldown during battle. Cooldown reduction promised more value than another direct attack, because it could protect multiple crucial skills. He applied it to recovery, recognizing that condition removal only mattered when available at the fatal moment. Halving recovery addressed both enemy control and the dangerous silence conditions he would later encounter. Miso gave him the Heart of Ice because he had defeated Cerberus alone, and the others accepted her accounting. Group permission prevented the reward from creating resentment. After Shin's independent boss decision, she had once seen him handling an artifact privately, but mistook Devour for a strange personal ritual. She deliberately left him alone, believing privacy mattered more than understanding the strange behavior. Shin accepted the embarrassing misunderstanding because revealing his exclusive growth ability would create far worse danger. Jui assumed the ritual was personal and inappropriate, making Shin regret the misunderstanding without correcting it. Absorbing the heart supplied a freezing effect, powerful enough to combine with the movement of full charging. A freezing charge could create a brief control window, even when Demon Bash met resistance. His past knowledge suggested the final grisly boss would emerge if they gathered monster corpses as bait. Boss instincts favored fresh food, so gathering bodies converted ordinary loot cleanup into a strategic lure. Jui assembled the bodies, Tessak lit a fire, and the scent eventually drew the massive bear from hiding. The 20-minute wait tested confidence, because failure would leave the team exposed around one obvious location. Shin proposed lowering its health until gluttony activated, then feeding it corpses mixed with sedating juniper wood. Juniper mattered only after the bear consumed it, requiring gluttony before sedation could begin. He volunteered as bait, assuming his new growth had made the dangerous role more manageable than it was. The plan preserved allies for their specialized steps but concentrated immediate danger entirely on Shin. The bear's speed destroyed that confidence and nearly caught him during an airborne dodge. His assumption ignored the physical difference between remembered technique and a still-developing body. Miso shot directly into its mouth, interrupting the follow-up, and giving Shin room to activate full charging. Her intervention preserved the plan without taking control away from the person serving as bait. Heart of Ice froze the charging path and held the resistant bear for one critical second. The unexpected combination showed Devour's greatest value. Unrelated artifact effects could become one tactical sequence. Tessak unleashed Blue Flame Flamingo, pushing the wounded monster across the threshold into uncontrolled gluttony. The flaming attack damaged health quickly without forcing Tessak into dangerous close range. The bear pursued Shin, while Jui struggled to move the prepared feast into its path. Moving so many corpses required Jui to exhaust the spatial capacity she normally reserved for retreat. Psychedelic sharpened his reactions, but the next attack left no safe direction and forced a direct block. Blocking under psychedelic risked the precise penalty Shin needed to avoid. Jui completed the warp before impact, transported every sedated corpse, and collapsed after emptying her mana. Her collapse removed emergency transport, making sedation outcome the team's only safe path forward. The starving bear devoured the bait, absorbed the juniper, and slowed enough for the team to finish it. Once its movement slowed, combined attacks finished the creature without another risky chase. Frost Hell cleared with every member alive, correcting Shin's memory of raids where favorable odds still killed friends. Jui considered the mana collapse proof. She had expanded her limit rather than merely suffered. From that point, survival meant bringing companions home rather than simply escaping alone. That promise turned party survival into a personal stake, replacing Shin's former isolated ambition. First Clear Reward offered Shin several unique artifacts, plus a hidden effect guaranteed by his Constellation contract. Ordinary Gate rewards could never include both unique quality and a hidden property without the goddess's blessing. He selected the Great Sword of Fighting Spirit, whose knockback burst could convert a swing into explosive displacement. The sword also increased recovery, adding passive survival value beyond its explosive combat effect. Its immense weight initially defeated him because Devour had reduced, not completely erased, lightweight's penalty. 100 kilograms remained after lightweight reduction, far more than his current frame could control casually. His teammates also awarded him the final boss carcass and magic stones after calculating contribution fairly. Shin calculated roughly 150 million won from the carcass before managing his visible excitement. Their consideration felt unfamiliar to someone whose former teams usually ended in graves, blame, or permanent separation. Fair treatment made future teamwork feel possible, without recreating the exploitation of his earliest raid. Miso asked permission to call him whenever necessary, and her bright smile softened an answer he meant to keep distant. Tessok and Jui noticed the exchange, and quietly felt they were intruding on something more personal. In a secluded alley, Shin consumed his fated sword and activated the unique weapon's absorbed effects. Devouring the previous weapon transferred accumulated usage and improved compatibility with its unique replacement. Knockback Burst joined his build. The weapon became manageable, and his combat rank reached C. The new rank reflected practical combat evaluation rather than level alone, matching the world's revised system. He invested again until luck reached 200, expanding the possible power of a critical strike dramatically. At 200 luck, the critical range could rise from 120 to 600%. Several heroic constellations approached, but Shin rejected contracts that could control his entire future career. The Lion King and owner of the beautiful beard carried fame, but their pride promised constant conflict. The Dark Hunter left with a warning that she would investigate the secret behind his illegal-looking growth. That warning linked his suspicious growth to celestial law enforcement rather than ordinary guild curiosity. Shin next drove to Byong Station because memory placed a deadly cobalt rift there within minutes. He remembered the exact station because the former rift had produced casualties reported across the country. A rift tore open between worlds, allowing monsters to enter the city without dungeon walls containing them. Unlike gates, rifts directly threatened streets and could not be ignored until a scheduled party assembled. 11 years earlier, a similar disaster killed people from Shin's orphanage and taught him the weight of loss. A hero had once saved young Shin there, planting the reason he originally wanted player strength. This time he arrived before the breach, activated his canine title, and met the first kobolds at the exit. The title intimidated the beasts, but hidden moonlight prevented the obedience he had achieved with Cerberus. Clouds weakened the domination effect, so Shin used full charging and knockback burst to clear the street instead. Repeated critical X turned the combination into a broad attack, capable of scattering clustered shields. Player Association brothers Li Hyun and Li Jiang arrived expecting casualties, only to find civilians untouched. Their combat team had mobilized quickly, yet Shin's advanced knowledge had still placed him 10 minutes ahead. They recognized Shin's intention to enter the rift and requested permission to follow as observers. Witnessing the interior would also let the association confirm what happened, instead of relying on publicity. He accepted, using a cobalt corpse as a shield, when hidden archers welcomed them with a coordinated volley. Shin briefly regretted bringing them when their fear created another responsibility inside the hostile breach. A cobalt champion appeared unusually early, carrying power that should have forced the group backward. Meeting a boss on the second floor meant this rift had deviated from the expected difficulty curve. The Great Sword of Fighting Spirit shattered its shield and body, revealing how strongly the unique artifact amplified strikes. The hidden unique weapon effect supplied force beyond Shin's own stats, justifying his expensive first clear choice. Shin equipped rapid movement shoes from the drop and continued through floors packed with increasingly organized enemies. The shoes doubled movement speed and immediately addressed the mobility needed against ranged cobalt formations. 5 silver items, 4 gold ones, and 1 platinum reward followed, validating the risk of entering first. Clever Hunter Restored spent stamina throughout the massacre, preventing the long operation from exhausting him early. At the treasure chamber, glittering coins almost distracted him, long enough for the hidden Cobalt King to land an arrow. Greed was the chamber's real trap, using treasure to lower the awareness of anyone entering the king's range. The boss controlled distance, fired an endless barrage, and inflicted overwhelm through its royal gaze. The king's intelligence separated it from earlier monsters, which mostly relied on strength or predictable instinct. Recovery protected Shin, but the Lee brothers froze, proving the king outclassed ordinary level 100 players. Their paralysis also meant Shin had to manage the boss while protecting 2 allies who could not move. Demon Bash failed against its resistance, while ranged pressure prevented Shin from closing safely. The mismatch exposed how completely a high-resistance enemy could shut down his strongest control chain. He recognized the arrows guiding him toward a trap and deliberately accepted damage to manipulate the king's confidence. Li Hyun noticed the pattern and warned him, unaware that Shin had already chosen to enter it. Sacrifice activated at the chosen moment, restored his health, and turned the planned killing ground into ammunition. The restored body allowed him to spend psychedelic aggressively instead of retreating after the king's calculated damage. Psychedelic combined with knockback burst, hurling loose gold coins like bullets across the chamber. Coins surrounded the ranged boss, giving Shin an improvised projectile field without carrying a bow. The wounded king survived, but its broken rhythm finally allowed Shin to close and finish the battle directly. Destroying its weapon ended the range advantage and converted the final exchange into sword distance. He earned 2 hours of overwhelm immunity through The Drink Goes Cold, a constellation-granted title. The title originated from a patron famous for finishing battles before his drink lost warmth. Other rewards included a despair talisman, backstep, and a search necklace that detected enemies within 100 meters. Search became especially important because future assassins and hidden mages could not be countered after appearing. The rift began collapsing before Shin could remove its treasure, and the brothers physically trekked outside. Remaining seconds mattered more than money because a collapsing dimensional space would kill everyone inside. Reporters named him the hero of Byong's station while he mourned the fortune disappearing behind the closing breach. Shin's devastated expression confused fans, expecting a proud hero celebrating a clean public rescue. Association scouts saw more than publicity. They began comparing Shin's impossible growth curve with established national elites. His front-page interview argued that level was only a statistic, strengthening debate about the new ranking system. Strategy analyst Lee Gahi interviewed Yoon, Taesok, and Jui about the instincts guiding his battles. Yoon emphasized control, while the Gate teammates focused on predictive movement and the absence of openings. Every witness described a veteran who anticipated enemy decisions before his young body should understand them. Their accounts described reflexes that moved his body before conscious analysis should have finished. Deputy Leader Min-jae mocked that conclusion by asking whether the rookie had somehow regressed. The accusation sounded sarcastic inside the meeting, but its accuracy gave Gahi a dangerous investigative direction. Gahi treated the joke as a real possibility, creating a future threat Shin had not yet detected. Scout leadership assigned her exclusive responsibility for Shin, granting more access to the target she secretly studied. After absorbing the rift rewards, search, backstep, and overwhelm expanded his answers against hidden or controlling enemies. Adaptive abilities followed Gyeong Su's philosophy that versatility outlasted players relying only on strength. The association offered a ceremonial plaque, but Shin rejected attention that did nothing against coming disasters. Public honors could increase attention without providing experience, protection, or any useful artifact. He accepted priority access to Silent Ground instead, because memory connected that dungeon to a friend's dead sister. Priority access arrived through the Byong rescue, turning public service into a chance to correct private regret. The public rating ignored its true middle boss, allowing underprepared teams to enter and disappear. Ordinary teams prepared for level 120 ghouls, not an armored soul-bound executioner. Shin arrived beside the legendary swordsman Yong, whose presence attracted crowds before either man touched the gate. Fans blocked traffic around the dungeon, while the famous swordsman answered every question with cold simplicity. Reporters expected admiration, yet Shin looked at the national icon as a benchmark he intended to surpass. Shin's challenge was internal, but Gyeong-su recognized intention in the way the younger swordsman watched him. Gyeong-su noticed that gaze and recognized a challenger, where everyone else saw only a rising fan. Their paths separated without conversation, leaving mutual awareness, rather than another unnecessary public confrontation. Near Silent Ground, an angry young woman complained that Shin had stolen her scheduled entrance. The association had delayed her party because Shin's priority card legally moved him to the front. He recognized her as the sister he meant to save, though neither sibling knew him in this timeline. Saving her would preserve the brother who once saved Shin, even if neither understood the connection. Shin entered alone and met undead whose slightest touch imposed a brief silence condition. The undead environment also carried a foul smell that made the long solo operation physically miserable. The debuff disabled active skills, forcing him to rely on evasive swordsmanship whenever a ghoul reached him. A momentary silence could still become fatal if a stronger monster timed its strike during that gap. Search exposed a much larger swarm, and suicide flies controlled by distant skeletal mages. The insects exploded on contact, allowing hidden casters to damage him without entering sword range. Their explosions arrived in chains, but Shin's newly trained defensive sword formed a stationary barrier around him. Defensive sword came from 3 days of repeatedly blocking automated arrows in a controlled training room. He changed its angle into a movable shield above his body and advanced through the blast zone. The improvised umbrella preserved protection, while letting Shin close instead of waiting inside repeated blasts. Knockback burst broke the mages and opened the path, but the deathly presence beyond them emptied the dungeon corridors. Only one signature remained on search because lesser undead had fled from the approaching middle boss. The Death Knight of Penance and Rage appeared behind Shin. With speed his search ability could barely register. Instinct saved him from the opening strike, when detection supplied presence but insufficient directional detail. Its constant purple swamp imposed silence on contact, while every soul bound inside strengthened the undead armor. Trained souls increased both power and malice, explaining why each successful victim made the boss deadlier. Shin finally understood why common ghouls hid from the middle boss instead of gathering near it. The corridor was not empty by chance. Every creature had recognized an apex killer entering the area. One heavy exchange split his lip and suggested a difficulty approaching A rank or even S rank. Shin's equipment absorbed part of the impact, but repeated exchanges would break his body before the armor. Old doubt returned at the edge of death, but Shin challenged the habit by forcing himself upright. His former self often interpreted fear as proof he should retreat, creating limits that lasted decades. He fled toward the dungeon center, using speed shoes to stay ahead while hunting weaker undead for recovery. Running was not surrender, because every monster on the route became a resource for the next phase. Clever Hunter restored stamina with each kill, and rising health allowed him to keep the Death Knight chasing. The title rewarded active hunting, so killing while retreating restored what passive recovery could not. The boss recognized that tactic and killed nearby ghouls itself, denying Shin the resources sustaining his escape. Intelligence inside the knight's soul let it adapt rather than follow an exploitable routine endlessly. Its swamp then swallowed the floor, canceled active skills, and trapped him beneath relentless armored attacks. Remaining still inside the swamp meant every defensive answer would disappear before the next heavy blow. A memory surfaced of the friend who had begged to be buried beside his lost younger sister. That death represented a promise Shin had never fulfilled, and a family tragedy he could still prevent. Shin had once saved his trump cards too long, and watched people die while waiting for a better moment. Holding abilities for a later boss was pointless if the current enemy ended the raid first. Refusing that mistake, he activated Psychedelic and used its heightened speed to attack from shifting angles. Psychedelic improved perception and physical response, but accumulated strain continued building beneath the temporary state. Strength could not break the armor directly, so a critical strike amplified by luck targeted the exposed faceplate. 600% critical range transformed one accurate hit into force capable of cracking the knight's plate. The blow forced the knight backward and pushed its health low enough to activate life flames. Self-destruction made the boss strongest, immediately before death, punishing anyone who mistook low health for safety. That ultimate sacrifice maximized its offense for 10 seconds, before guaranteeing self-destruction. The countdown provided certainty, but 10 seconds against maximized attacks could feel longer than an entire raid. Shin could not win the exchange, so he committed to surviving every remaining second instead. Shin stopped seeking damage and measured success only by whether the timer decreased while he remained alive. The knight pursued, threw its weapon, and steadily reduced the space available for another dodge. Each evasive movement consumed resources he would need if the final second did not resolve as expected. At 4 seconds, Swamp of Silence locked the area and removed Shin's movement abilities again. Silence removed active speed precisely when the knight's claws were close enough to finish him. He remembered an old teammate explaining that one cleansing window could decide a supposedly impossible silent raid. The remembered advice finally made sense because cleansing did not need to last, only create one exit. Recovery cleared the condition despite its cooldown, allowing Backstep to carry him away with 3 seconds left. Backstep had come from the Cobalt Rift, proving a previous reward could solve an unrelated future crisis. At 1 second, Shin collapsed without mana, while the knight's claws descended toward his face. No strength remained to block, leaving survival entirely dependent on the countdown he could no longer see. Life flames expired first, dissolving the Death Knight close enough for its final motion to disturb his hair. Victory came from understanding the ultimate condition, not overpowering the knight during its strongest state. The enormous experience reward raised skills repeatedly and restored enough health to keep his body alive. Health recovery concealed the deeper problem because system numbers could not replace completely drained physical endurance. Stamina remained empty, so Shin canceled psychedelic and expected ordinary exhaustion from avoiding damage. Since no direct hit landed during activation, he believed the delayed cost would remain manageable. Accumulated strain exceeded the skill's limit, releasing a delayed penalty that knocked him unconscious immediately. The penalty counted accumulated stress rather than visible injury, exposing his mistaken understanding of the skill. Undead approached the helpless player until the goddess of luck revealed herself and frightened them away. Her intervention violated the usual distance of constellations, suggesting the contract carried protection Shin had not expected. Shin later woke beside the sleeping patron, understood who had protected him, and postponed questions until safety. He chose not to wake her after she had spent unknown effort guarding his unconscious body. The Death Knight left only a silent ring, whose nighttime dungeon effect multiplied mana recovery fourfold. During daytime use, the ring would drain mana, which explained its disappointing market value. Disappointment vanished when Shin noticed the experience had launched him nearly 20 levels to level 83. The boss had traded physical loot for an enormous concentrated experience reward instead. He consumed the ring beside a campfire and obtained mana circulation without its daytime draining penalty. Inside the gap, the ring appeared as bone marrow with quiet forest greens. Triple mana recovery created the answer he would need against the true boss still waiting deeper inside. Continuous recovery now supported silence-infused basic attacks and longer battles against mana-draining enemies. The Goddess of Luck called Devour a restriction-free growth ability rare, even among dimensions. She viewed his ability as something capable of rising indefinitely rather than following normal item limits. Shin answered that regression itself had already been a ridiculous stroke of fortune, which pleased his patron. The admission almost revealed too much, so he quickly framed regression as another unexplained awakening miracle. Their conversation expanded his ambition from national ranker to the legendary British Archmage Giron Decay. Giron controlled 4 elements and defended S-class rifts, a stage beyond ordinary national fame. Recovered at last, he entered the audience chamber of the Weary King, an archalich with multiple casting arms. The archalich spoke an ancient language first, then changed tongues to promise Shin an entertaining death. Portals opened around Shin and released spells from every direction, rapidly draining mana through constant evasive movement. 3 casting arms allowed simultaneous magic that human mages could not reproduce without sacrificing accuracy. The undead mage watched his earlier battles and calculated that silence would leave him unable to counter. Its surveillance made the final chamber a test against an enemy already familiar with Shin's known tools. Language of silence missed directly, but the Archlich blinked away from Shin's sword and launched purgatory flames nearby. Close purgatory flames should have punished his approach after the boss's teleport avoided the first cut. Shin still reached him, severing two casting arms while declaring that luck was the foundation of his position. Shin had preserved just enough movement to extend the attack beyond the location the mage calculated. The boss's prediction failed because mana circulation recovered resources far faster than the observed capacity suggested. Devouring the silent ring had altered his resource rate after the boss completed its observations. One final stroke ended silent ground and corrected a dungeon classification responsible for many future deaths. Reclassification followed because the surviving player's evidence revealed the hidden danger official surveys had missed. Outside, Shin saw his former best friend, waiting beside the sister who had now survived. The brother had come after his angry sister requested help when Shin remained inside beyond the schedule. In the first timeline, that man rescued Shin from isolation and gave him a home inside a weak guild. That weak guild later taught him cooperation, warmth, and reasons to continue when personal progress stalled. Losing the sister eventually pushed his friend toward despair, responsibility, and a life he never truly wanted. In this life, keeping the sister alive could prevent the grief that eventually crushed him. Emotion made Shin advise the stranger never to form a guild, confusing both siblings who had not met him yet. The woman reacted angrily, believing the stranger who stole their dungeon was now insulting her brother. He walked away relieved that the debt was partly repaid and hoped his friend could choose happiness this time. Shin could not explain a debt created in a life only he remembered. Silent ground was restricted after the Death Knight's danger became public, preventing the casualties Shin remembered. The corrected rating became a concrete saved future rather than another vague intention to change history. Its final rewards included a subspace bag, a lich ring carrying silence, and a telekinesis necklace. These artifacts offered mobility, storage, and control instead of simply adding more raw damage. Subspace ignored ordinary mass, while telekinesis could summon linked items into combat without physical retrieval. Removing physical weight let him carry supplies and treasures that would otherwise require an entire porter team. Shin bound telekinesis to his great sword and considered how silence could join his existing attacks. Binding telekinesis to the sword meant disarming him would no longer leave the weapon beyond reach. Attaching silence to every basic strike cost 1 mana each time, a serious burden during large monster waves. Against swarms, hundreds of ordinary swings could empty his reserves faster than any dramatic finishing move. The B-rank title, End of a Twisted Desire, added 150 mana, making the gamble sustainable. The mana title arrived from resolving the Archalic's warped desire, matching the cost of its own ability. Mana circulation covered continued use, so Shin accepted the cost and created a disabling basic attack. Every successful hit could now interrupt enemy skill use, according to the target's resistance. 3 constellations appeared immediately afterward, including a new goddess offering information about his former patron. The Sun King and Great Conqueror also appeared, turning the gap into an argument over Shin's future. She claimed the late bloomer model student now lived in the Dimension Core slums, studying its eschatology. She withheld the student's exact purpose, using emotional importance as leverage for an unwanted contract. Shin wanted answers because that constellation had stayed beside him for decades and made regression possible. Gratitude made the information valuable, but it did not erase the risk of serving another ambitious patron. He still rejected a binding contract with the arrogant goddess, unwilling to trade his future for partial information. The goddess of luck fought to keep him, revealing how a player's growth could elevate a constellation's standing. The news was troubling because failed constellations lived in those slums, far below the student's former position. Something severe must have happened between Shin's death, the regression, and his patron's fall. While Shin investigated, the late bloomer moved through that dangerous district beneath the hood and pursued a hidden plan. His former guide considered the slums increasingly dangerous and wanted to execute the unknown plan before night. No public source explained Dimension Core eschatology, leaving Shin with questions he could not safely ask. Directly searching dimensional secrets could also attract the Dark Hunter or other celestial enforcement. He instead visited Hunjong Market, protected by Han Hunjong, the world's only S+ ranked buffer. High-rank players from many countries provided unofficial security simply by gathering near the famous buffer. Unexpected access to the 8th basement VIP floor exposed artifacts priced beyond every fortune he had recently earned. Special access suggested Han Hunjong had personally noticed his rapid public rise. The epic Book of the Abyss was expensive enough to make Shin pretend a swordsman had no interest in reading. Its price contained enough zeros to make his recent quest earnings feel completely irrelevant. Then he saw Jiran Decay's Almighty Mage Stone, listed with a starting price of 3 trillion credits. An almighty artifact offered for sale. Jiran possessed equipment even more valuable than the displayed stone. Rather than motivate him, the display showed how impossibly far the world's true monsters still stood above him. Shin needed that comparison, but seeing the scale directly still damaged his confidence. Shin retreated to the platinum floor, where Perfect Storm Jung Jun Hawk offered a specialized mana recovery ring. The ring restored stamina gradually every 10 minutes, a slow effect poorly matched with burst-oriented classes. Its narrow usefulness made it difficult to sell, yet Devour could preserve the desirable portion without class restrictions. Removing the limitation would convert a rejected recovery item into a permanent passive resource. Shin hid his interest because no other buyer would want the item, giving him room to negotiate later. Revealing enthusiasm would only help the seller raise a price for merchandise with no competing demand. A blunt seller nearby displayed a speed ring and a potential reinforcement ring with enormous mana demands. Speed and accelerated potential directly supported the growth path Shin had designed around repeated artifact meals. Those penalties destroyed their market value but made both items perfect food for a player who could erase costs. Most players could not keep either ring active long enough to justify their impressive descriptions. Past poverty had trained Shin well, and bargaining lowered the bundle from 2 billion to 1.3 billion won. The seller dropped her price repeatedly, after recognizing that Shin could simply walk away. The seller mentioned donating her remaining money to Joy Orphanage and revealed a photograph Shin recognized instantly. The market conversation changed from profit to a location tied to everyone Shin had once considered family. Her family had rebuilt the place where Shin grew up after its former collapse. Her parents had managed the original institution, giving her a personal reason to restore it after disaster. Children had drawn money symbols on a card, and seeing those shared memories reopened emotions he kept buried. Shin wondered which children from his memories had survived, but refused to interrogate a stranger emotionally. He promised to visit, then continued toward Eden headquarters, after Miso invited him to prepare for another gate. The visit could wait, while the Black Gate offered a limited first clear opportunity that would not. The Black Gate required 2 players moving in lockstep and promised an epic artifact worth around 120 billion. Compatibility between bow and sword mattered because the final enemies fought as a synchronized pair. Swordsman Joe Gino escorted Shin into Eden's restricted training room, while Miso remained with her father. Gino was one of Eden's strongest swordsmen and a national symbol of overwhelming physical force. Terry was already there fighting a golem without a reservation, and focused on Shin the moment he entered. The assassin cared more about Shin's arrival than the golem she had already dismantled. She left after offering another spar, while Chino quietly developed the same desire to test the strange rookie. In Eden, demanding a spar apparently functioned as a normal introduction among elite combatants. The level 700 giant activated gigantification and proposed 2 exchanges using full training protection. Training mode prevented lethal consequences, but it could not eliminate pain, recoil, or structural destruction. Jinyo represented the national peak of strength-focused swordsmanship, the path Shin had followed in his older life. His massive body and specialized blade turned every swing into pressure capable of moving the air itself. Their first collision forced Shin to combine psychedelic, face-off, critical power, and knockback burst merely to hold. Face-off activated because the protected room contained no other participant inside the required radius. Instead of evading, Shin challenged the giant directly and made Jinyo stumble with his return strike. Jinyo expected tricks from a versatile rookie, not a deliberate contest inside his own specialty. Respect replaced curiosity, and Jinyo unveiled the incomplete form of Starbreaker for their second exchange. The giant had never revealed Starbreaker publicly in this incomplete stage, making the decision a genuine compliment. Shin remembered that technique breaking summoned meteors during a future collapse. so direct resistance meant destruction. Future knowledge showed the finished version's terrifying ceiling, but offered no safe current counter. He targeted the flank where Jinyo's force was least concentrated, and released his strongest combined counter. A slightly weaker point in the force distribution was still stronger than most players' entire attacks. Their collision wrecked the supposedly protected floor and sent vibrations through the entire Eden building. The reinforced facility endured elite training routinely, making the destruction evidence of both fighters' output. Miso burst inside to find both men exhausted, Shin's wrist damaged, and the training schedule completely ruined. Her intended teamwork session became impossible because the floor, walls, and equipment needed repairs. Jinyo felt genuine damage from a beginner and recognized the instincts of someone hardened by years of war. That conclusion pushed Jinyo to train harder instead of dismissing the damage as luck. Miso punished Shin with 18 hours of teamwork practice, which became exhausting but extremely valuable preparation. Continuous practice also taught Shin how Miso processed his signals under fatigue rather than ideal conditions. 2 days before the Black Gate, Scout Lee Gahi approached and asked whether his ability copied skills or saw the future. She presented association identification, making refusal or direct hostility riskier than an ordinary stranger's question. Shin concealed his reaction, but the accurate questions kept him awake because he found no history explaining her suspicion. Someone who correctly suspected future sight could eventually connect it to altered dungeons and save casualties. Miso arrived with an epic bow borrowed from a Japanese guild, determined not to become a burden beside his growth. Miso understood his current growth could leave her behind, unless she improved technique and equipment together. Her equipment erased Shin's distraction, and the pair entered Hollow Forest expecting terrain from the preliminary survey. The raid offered no full party backup, making their drilled two-person patterns essential from the entrance. The landscape and monsters differed from Shin's memory, proving regression knowledge could not guarantee an unchanged path. One changed monster might be chance, but an altered landscape suggested deeper timeline consequences. A giant goblin charged first, and Shin signaled the evasive pattern they had drilled through repeated hand movements. Hand signs prevented monsters from learning plans through speech and kept coordination possible under noise. Miso dodged opposite him, shot the monster's joint, and discovered her borrowed bow tripled her practical firepower. She had expected restraint damage, not an arrow capable of tearing through the joint completely. Shin used the opening to finish it, then revised their tactics around her suddenly lethal ranged output. Shin moved from teacher to partner, adjusting immediately instead of forcing the original plan. Detection found hidden Cobalt assassins among another group, making conventional positioning too dangerous. Invisible assassins could target the ranged partner. Before Shin noticed an ordinary visual approach, Shin chose the human cannonball pattern, placed Miso on his sword, and launched her above the battlefield. Height protected her from melee while granting clear firing angles across the clustered monsters. Her flight skill slowed the fall, while arrows destroyed targets that could no longer reach their shooter. She hated the sensation, yet the tactic forced flight to become a practical combat tool. Shin protected the airborne sniper from stealth attackers, and Miso locked onto 7 monsters simultaneously. Their roles reversed briefly, and her arrows carried the damage and his sword guarded the shooter. Stardust Rain multiplied her fire, clearing the remaining enemies before they could reorganize beneath the cliffs. Multiple lock-on allowed every projectile to acquire a separate target instead of concentrating wastefully. By nightfall, she was furious that Shin had repeated the terrifying launch 6 separate times. His claim that monsters required it became less convincing each time he visibly enjoyed the maneuver. Ordinary gifts meant little to a wealthy heiress, so he used monster meat and his past knowledge to cook dinner. Subspace let him carry cooking tools and ingredients without sacrificing ordinary combat inventory. Miso loved the beef Wellington, unaware that its meat actually came from cobalt rather than a harmless rabbit. Cobalt meat resembled safe ordinary meats, closely enough to hide inside the carefully prepared dish. A rare allergy lowered her inhibitions and pushed her to ask what existed between them beyond business. The question approached feelings Miso had not planned to reveal during a dangerous expedition. Shin remembered the symptoms and pretended to suffer the same reaction by loudly declaring he wanted to become a bird. Becoming more absurd than her confession, redirected attention toward him and gave the reaction a shared explanation. His ridiculous performance spared her embarrassment. though maintaining it became one of his hardest battles that night. He copied remembered advice from someone who had once managed another party member's identical allergy. The next morning, both blamed the meal and returned attention to the unmapped half of Hollow Forest. Neither mentioned the confession, preserving their coordination without forcing an emotional decision inside the gate. Shadow defenders waited in an organized group. Behavior expecting an intelligent commander already knew they were coming. Coordinated guarding behavior proved the middle boss was treating its subordinates as a formation. The impenetrable defender king emerged as middle bossets and attacked Miso before ordinary tactics could settle. Its defense forced Miso's arrows to support movement rather than seek an immediate killing shot. Shin intercepted with speed, yet even a ground-shattering blow left the armored creature unharmed. The title was functional, not dramatic. Ordinary physical attacks truly could not penetrate it. A long battle would waste resources needed later. So he signaled Miso to reach higher ground. Distance protected her from the mana-consuming destructive radius Shin was about to create. Shin concentrated every point of available mana into Sword of Destruction, his former life's finishing technique. Swordsman normally awakened this technique after far more progression, but his remembered training accelerated the condition. Pure destructive energy wrapped the blade and carved completely through defense's normal force could not scratch. Shin focused the effect instead of relying on the broad but inefficient form he had used when older. The middle boss collapsed, giving Shin his first legitimate one-strike finisher after regression. The achievement also gave him a reliable answer for opponents built entirely around defense. Celebration lasted 3 seconds before mana exhaustion dropped him unconscious beside the defeated monster. A finishing technique that emptied the user could become another path to death if the room held reinforcements. Miso restored him with an Eden mana drink worth 500 million won and questioned his reckless resource management. One bottle restored what natural mana circulation could not recover quickly enough after complete depletion. Shin accidentally said it had been a long time since using a skill he supposedly awakened days earlier. The slip joined his unusual combat knowledge as another clue an intelligent observer could remember. He buried the mistake beneath nervous nonsense, while Miso stored another unexplained inconsistency for later. Her suspicion remained unresolved, but reaching the unexplored zone demanded immediate focus. They reached Breathless Village, a location absent from both the survey and Shin's previous timeline. Dead monsters and village structures appeared, where old reports described only forest, undermining every remembered route. When he tried revealing remembered boss information, time froze, and the goddess of luck appeared physically. Physical interference by a constellation should have been impossible under the world's established rules. She warned that once others understood why he was special, the advantage separating him would disappear. Her protection blocked every other constellations from hearing a statement that could expose regression. Shin resumed time with a false YouTube explanation and resolved to expose no further regression knowledge. Even Miso could become an accidental danger if celestial observers extracted the truth from their conversations. Predation network. Players could steal constellations and abilities, making any proof of regression an invitation to be hunted. Their leader Luca Vile would later push the world toward collapse through stolen powers and hidden identities. Shin and Miso separated to search the village, despite knowing the unknown boss moved at exceptional speed. Splitting increased personal risk, but reduced the chance the fast target could circle both unnoticed. Miso found equally decomposed corpses far apart, evidence that the hunter could cross huge distances almost instantly. Matching decomposition times meant corpses had died together, despite the physical distance separating them. A presence appeared behind her, dodged an instinctive arrow, and destroyed Maria's pendant with its first claw. The pendant absorbed a fatal attack once, leaving no second emergency barrier between Miso and the claw. Terry's assassin training taught Miso to read the forward foot, breathing rhythm, habits, and preferred ambush direction. Technique could narrow an assassin's advantage, but she needed observation time the monster refused to provide. Miso predicted one rear attack and landed an arrow, only for a second predator to appear behind her. Her correct prediction solved one attacker, while exposing the existence of its coordinated twin. Shin arrived before the killing strike and identified the pair as Lobless, the twin predators of Hollow Forest. He had tracked her position after discovering signs that the boss was deliberately collecting kills as trophies. Their synchronization explained why the gate required two perfectly coordinated players rather than one overwhelming fighter. Neither predator was unbeatable alone. Their seamless coverage made every attempted counter expose another angle. Protecting Miso directly would create openings. So Shin stopped using signals and trusted her independent decisions. Trusting her autonomy removed the predictable pattern of an attacker waiting for Shin to defend her. She announced rapid fire, covering every angle with arrows, while Shin synchronized psychedelic and movement speed. Their combined speed created an unfamiliar rhythm the twin hunters had never evolved to read. One predator appeared behind him, but Miso shot its claw and created the opening for his counter. Her support did not require a command, showing the repeated training had become instinctive. The other targeted her immediately, exactly as Shin predicted, and his blade removed its head before impact. Eliminating the first twin broke both the formation and the survivor's emotional control. Losing its twin drove the survivor into a transformation that exchanged impossible speed for enormous physical strength. Larger muscles increased striking power but slowed the reactions that had previously avoided every sword path. That trade removed the defense, keeping it alive, allowing Shin to bury his sword in its skull. Shin attacked before the transformation stabilized, denying raw strength any chance to become useful. Hollow Forest cleared. Shin reached level 90, and an epic artifact selection appeared as the first clear prize. The level gain left him only 10 steps from the special reward, granted at level 100. He chose the Updraft Belt because its airborne launch added vertical control to a build, lacking reliable aerial movement. The belt could disarm, reposition, or interrupt enemies without depending on ordinary status resistance. Miso received 9 Splitter, the bow that duplicated every fired arrow into 9 identical projectiles. Her new weapon replaced the borrowed epic bow with something personally earned from their joint clear. Shin recognized it as the weapon behind her future title. Divine Archer of Carnage. 9 copies preserved the original arrow's skills, multiplying both damage and specialized effects. She was already approaching the greatness he remembered, and her acceleration made his own growth feel less lonely. Miso was no longer only a person he remembered. Her present choices were producing a different relationship. Shin tested Updraft by launching Miso unexpectedly, earning a scream that carried across the cleared gate. The betrayal proved he had not entirely abandoned the human cannonball joke after the serious battle. Elsewhere, Predation Network leader Luca Vile displayed another stolen constellation and selected Shin as new prey. Predation members treated murdered players as prey and compared the constellations stolen from their bodies. Network member Tori studied his profile under a hidden identity, determined to devour him before anyone else. Her obsession made ordinary surveillance more dangerous because she wanted the target alive only until consumption. Tori was Lee Gahi, the supposed association scout, whose questions had already approached the truth. The association role provided access to reports, teammates, and personal questions without triggering suspicion. Shin saw news of a frozen player's corpse and recognized the period when the network became openly active. Recent timeline changes meant the network might target Korea and Shin sooner than remembered. Hiding would fail if they already tracked him, so he chose to reach level 100 before the hunt arrived. Level 100 promised a special point, capable of guaranteeing improvement to one central skill. Joy Orphanage became his next stop, where children argued over swords, bows, and assassins with familiar excitement. The rebuilt building held none of the ruin he remembered, giving the visit an unexpectedly hopeful atmosphere. Shin gave them game consoles and encouraged their ambitions, expecting at least one child to choose him as inspiration. Children immediately treated his celebrity as less impressive than the heroes they already followed. They preferred Gyeong-soo Miso and Terry, reducing the growing celebrity to an annoyed substitute. Their rejection amused him because it reflected the ordinary childhood he wanted the orphanage to preserve. Manager Ham Jian privately showed him a diamond flame talisman shield with an evolvable fire enchantment. The enchantment began weak but could rise in grade through use, giving Shin another long-term effect. Tanks considered its offensive specialty inefficient, but that narrow flaw made the artifact ideal for Devour. Specialized flaws repeatedly allowed him to acquire power at prices far below general-purpose equipment. Shin purchased it and recognized Jian's unusual talent for finding valuable items nobody else could use. Maintaining contact with Jian could provide a steady source of artifacts ignored by conventional builds. Consumption presented noodles hotter than 50,000 Scoville and forced him through several cartons of milk. The gap translated fire into punishing heat, matching flavor to the artifact's elemental nature. The reward was small fire, a low-cost flame capable of evolving naturally through repeated use. Spending only 1 mana let him practice the flame constantly without disrupting mana circulation. Fire expanded physical damage, faster casting, and future combinations, but only practical combat could turn possibility into mastery. Owning many abilities would mean nothing if poor combinations prevented any one of them from deciding a battle. Unfortunately, Shin's unofficial level and rank-limited association, access to dungeons that could challenge him. High-level guilds controlled the best gates, while association assignments still evaluated him through incomplete official measurements. That progression bottleneck ended when Terry arrived at his apartment with a classified national security document. Building security had not failed. An S-rank guest simply carried enough authority to reach his door. Monsters from uncontrolled North Korean rifts had transformed Kaesong into a volatile territory requiring large-scale subjugation. Unchecked northern rifts allowed monster populations to grow until ordinary borders no longer contained them. Eden Guild wanted Shin as a hired scout because his versatility covered gaps raw destructive power could not. They possessed enough damage already, but unknown terrain demanded someone capable of changing tactics rapidly. He accepted before reading payment details, seeing an A-rank battlefield filled with level 100 targets. A mass subjugation also promised contribution rewards from far more enemies than any private dungeon. The historic mission would eventually establish Miso, Terry, and Genio worldwide, according to Shin's first timeline. Joining the campaign offered a chance to alter another major event instead of merely collecting experience. 3 days remained before deployment, but Terry stayed seated after completing every official part of the visit. Shin first mistook the silence for unfinished guild business because Terry refused to state her personal motive. Her deliberate cough finally made Shin understand that the #1 hunter had come wanting another match. The elite assassin had found normal training empty after their first exchange and wanted that pressure again. They moved to a player town training room and agreed to remove the restrictions limiting their first encounter. Full skills transformed the spar from physical testing into a genuine comparison of their complete combat builds. Shin requested 1 day of personal instruction if he won, hoping an S-rank opponent could refine him. Training from the woman he aimed to surpass could improve weaknesses no ordinary instructor would recognize. Terry demanded permanent Eden membership if she won, a condition far greater than the training coupon. Terry trusted herself enough to stake a permanent recruitment condition against a still-developing rookie. To balance it, she promised permanent assistance whenever Shin called, then drew her twin daggers. Her assistance clause could eventually place Korea's strongest hunter beside Shin during a future disaster. The pressure around Shin's sword felt like death itself. Awakening excitement Terry had not found against ordinary opponents. For Terry, fear and excitement arrived together because his presence resembled something stronger than his visible rank. She opened in shadow mode, accelerated beyond sight, and surrounded him with 7-mana balanced clones. Her clones were not illusions alone. Each carried enough force to punish the wrong defensive choice. Detection could not distinguish the original, because Terry distributed power evenly through every moving copy. Equal mana signatures defeated search and forced Shin to test the copies through effects rather than observation. Each clone attacked with genuine timing, forcing Shin to maintain defensive sword against a coordinated storm of blades. 7 angles prevented a simple counterattack because committing toward one dagger exposed several others. Overwhelm could not affect Terry through the level gap, but the condition weakened several clones. The clones' weaker resistance became the only measurable difference between copies and their owner. Shin followed the unaffected presence and attacked, only to learn she could shift convincing control between bodies. Terry deliberately manipulated that difference, sacrificing a body to make his conclusion unreliable. The apparent original became another trap, and Terry emerged behind him, while all remaining copies closed together. She expected the surrounding clones to eliminate every retreat before he recovered from the deception. Shin had deliberately conserved power to draw that formation, then dismantled 4 clones in rapid succession. Holding power earlier preserved the acceleration needed once her entire formation committed. Updraft activated beneath Terry's true body and launched the strongest hunter away from her stable footing. Airborne launch ignored clone positioning and attacked the physical space beneath the confirmed original. She expected distance to protect her, not realizing Shin had developed an attack designed to travel upward. Her calculation assumed swords required close reach, exactly the limitation Shin's new finisher bypassed. Sword of Destruction gathered around the blade tip instead of consuming his entire mana pool recklessly. Controlled concentration avoided the collapse he suffered after destroying the Defender King. Small fire heated the weapon, concentrating another layer of damage into the narrow striking point. Fire raised the cutting point's temperature without requiring a separate swing or long casting sequence. Terry recognized a lethal finisher and answered with Pitch Black Needle, her ultimate assassination technique. Pitch Black Needle condensed her shadow power into the killing strike reserved for impossible targets. She had never used it against a living person, but Shin's growth demanded her full response. Choosing it acknowledged Shin as a threat rather than a rookie receiving another friendly test. Both fighters crossed the room like meteors and released their prepared techniques into one direct collision. Neither technique had appeared in their earlier spar, so both entered the collision without complete information. The impact spread across Playertown, while the training barrier contained damage that could have reached civilians. The protected environment let them measure the result without turning the surrounding city into collateral damage. When the energy cleared, Terry lay beneath Shin, with his sword stopped inches from her face. Shin stopped the blade precisely, preserving the meaning of victory without adding an unnecessary injury. The woman ranked above every other hunter smiled and admitted he had exceeded her expectations completely. Terry valued the answer because losing finally revealed a ceiling she could train to break. Shin had fulfilled the wager and decisively defeated the #1 fighter without taking her life or dignity. Miso's sister had wanted to judge Shin, but the result instead forced Eden's strongest fighter to reassess herself. Terry's defeat proved Devour had built more than high stats. It had created a toolkit capable of defeating specialists. Control, mobility, defense, cleansing, fire, and destruction had converged into one perfectly timed victory. The following morning, backlash from Sword of Destruction left Shin unable to rise without sharp pain. His younger muscles could perform remembered techniques, yet they still paid for force beyond current conditioning. Terry's message confirmed she would honor the permanent promise and answer whenever he requested help. Winning rejected permanent Eden membership and secured a powerful ally under terms. Terry proposed herself. Shin now knew he could contest S-rank opponents, though recovery afterward remained a dangerous limitation. One victory did not make him stronger than every S-rank, especially when specialized conditions could differ. Before Kaesong deployment, he visited a smaller open market because Hunjong Market was temporarily closed. The stop was practical, since his rapidly growing skill list made niche shopping more urgent than public celebration. A scammer displayed a supposed diamond sword, once wielded by Yong, complete with the fabricated stun history. Customers besearched because famous equipment history often mattered more than inspecting an item's real function. The actual artifact was a tough silver blade arranged to survive an anvil test without cutting steel. The scam depended on toughness protecting the fake. During demonstration, while the seller blamed weak technique, Shin recognized the deception and requested a demonstration, terrifying the seller after bystanders identified him. If Shin completed a full strength test, the blade and the merchant's entire setup would collapse together. Manager Ju Sunung-hoon intervened, shattered the fake with a small mana injection, and exposed the fraud publicly. Ju earned temporary credibility by exposing one scam in front of witnesses before offering private access. He then offered Shin access to a secret underground market containing the specialized artifacts he requested. The invitation sounded valuable because secret markets often contained illegal goods, unavailable through safe public floors. Shin asked for bronze through gold items under 100 million won, especially equipment with unwanted niche properties. Cheap, unwanted equipment could provide better absorbed effects than expensive artifacts designed for popular classes. Ju led him below and presented a unique dagger. Claiming exclusive membership could secure a generous discount. Ju expected exclusivity and rarity to distract Shin from signs that the supposed merchandise was fabricated. Blood in the air and the obviously false item revealed that the manager had guided him into an ambush. The underground route also removed witnesses and blocked the easy escape available on the public market floor. Shin still followed, because organized criminals offered both valuable artifacts and information about whoever hired them. Entering knowingly let Shin keep initiative mentally, though the enemy's actual ranks still exceed expectation. Detection counted 10 initial enemies: archers, swordsmen, a spearman, tanks, and one support mage. The balanced composition included defense, range, close pressure, and enhancement, indicating a planned target-specific operation. Their rotation and spacing belonged to trained mercenaries rather than desperate thieves looking for an easy robbery. Their skills and foreign members implied a paid contract large enough to recruit experienced professionals. A chain wielder opened by promising Shin would never break their formation or isolate its members. Weighted rotation could control space and punish anyone rushing toward the support mage. Shin caught the weighted chain against his sword and dragged the speaker violently across the floor. Breaking the opener physically showed that formation discipline could not erase differences in individual force. One mercenary cut through his own trapped ally rather than interrupt the attack, exposing their complete lack of loyalty. Cutting an ally also removed the leverage Shin might have gained by holding a hostage. Shin invoked the Special Player Act, which permitted lethal self-defense against organized threats, targeting awakened people. The law existed because old rules repeatedly failed players attacked by criminals inside supernatural environments. He stopped searching for sympathy and cut down the swordsman who claimed deeper motives no longer mattered. His decision followed proof of lethal intent, not a desire to expand violence beyond self-defense. Ju revealed himself as a combat buffer and strengthened 2 archers with Robin Hood protection. The buff increased firing rate and power, immediately turning mediocre archers into a coordinated projectile threat. Updraft carried Shin above their volley, proving stronger projectiles still failed when the shooters lacked sufficient speed. Shin attacked the unchanged baseline weakness rather than wasting effort contesting enhanced arrow strength. He dropped directly onto one archer, while the second abandoned the contract and fled the underground chamber. One enemy choosing survival weakened Ju's numerical advantage before the elite mercenaries fully engaged. Ju enhanced an A-rank swordsman named Chen Lele and a B-plus ranked spearman named Xiao. Paying international fighters explained why Shin could not recognize their language or personal histories. Their coordinated pincer forced Shin to duck a drawing strike that nearly removed his head. Chen's drawing technique nearly the support's buffs could even become the main problem. Xiao then used his spear to rescue Chen from Shin's counter, showing experience far above the earlier criminals. Their rescue movement preserved each other without spoken instruction, marking them as longtime battlefield partners. Shin welcomed the pressure because it offered the practical test his newly absorbed effects required. A real challenge could reveal whether his expanding arsenal functioned under pressure instead of controlled testing. Overwhelm froze Xiao during the next combination, allowing Shin to sever Chen's arm. Chen's lost arm reduced offense, but training and pain tolerance kept him from becoming helpless. Chen bandaged the wound without complaint, confirmed the target was far stronger than their intelligence, and continued fighting. Asking Shin's name showed respect arriving, only after the contract had already made retreat difficult. His 11 chain slashes filled the corridor, yet Shin passed through the barrage without a serious wound. Defensive sword and remembered timing protected him through a sequence designed to overwhelm ordinary guards. Shin answered with one committed strike and ended the one-armed swordsman's contract permanently. Xiao's grief created another threat, but Barrett's preparation demanded attention before emotional retaliation. Xiao roared, but a far greater danger appeared above, as S-rank archer Barrett Fletcher charged a glowing shot. The archer waited for close combat to separate enough that a paid shot would not strike allies. The arrow created a crater across the chamber, and Shin escaped only by abandoning his position immediately. Its destructive radius demonstrated why Barrett charged extra for each release, rather than joining ordinary exchanges. Psychedelic expired sooner than expected, removing the enhanced state while the strongest enemies remained untouched. Without the awakening state, Shin lost speed, recovery, and enhanced abilities simultaneously. Ju paid Barrett for repeated shots and hired twin A-plus tanks, Alexel and Alexander, to activate their innate ability. Ju accepted the extra expense because losing the operation would anger the unknown client behind it. The brothers fused into one distorted body, combining their defenses while Barrett controlled every open path. Fusion concentrated two bodies into a single defensive threat, capable of occupying Shin while Barrett fired. Shin considered retreat, because pride meant nothing if the formation killed him before Kaisong. Escaping alive could preserve his strength for Kaisong, but it would surrender answers and hard-won artifacts. A familiar voice entered his mind and instructed him that this exact moment was the time to charge. The mental transmission could only come from an ally, already close enough to observe Barrett's timing. Shin trusted it, ran into Barrett's firing lane, and shouted for the mercenaries to collect payment elsewhere. Charging openly looked suicidal, making the enemies focus on Shin instead of searching their own formation. Barrett welcomed the exposed target and prepared another lethal arrow before a heavy chain erupted unexpectedly. Barrett's stationary firing posture left him vulnerable to restraint, arriving from a trusted direction. The chain wrapped the S-rank archer and locked his arms before the bowstring could release. Losing arm movement prevented the shot, while keeping the dangerous archer alive and exposed. Someone hidden inside the mercenary ranks had deliberately created the first clean opening in the entire battle. The betrayer had waited until payment, formation, and attention aligned around one decisive interruption. Shin recognized Park Young-min's voice, a person he never expected to find operating beside the enemy. Park Young-min was concealed in plain sight, close enough to attack the mercenaries before they recognized him. Park's identity explains the confidence behind the message, but not why he entered the mercenary formation. Shin cannot ask for answers while Barrett, Zhu Xiao, and the Fused brothers still control the chamber. Psychedelic has already expired, leaving his body without the enhanced state that carried the earlier exchanges. Zhu remains capable of strengthening every mercenary who survives long enough to receive another blessing. Xiao still holds his spear, furious after watching Chen fall beneath Shin's decisive strike. Alexel and Alexander remain fused, concentrating two defensive fighters into one unnatural body. Barrett is restrained rather than defeated, and his S-rank firepower remains lethal if the chain loosens. The enemy still possesses numbers, enhancement, range, and the hidden client financing every expensive decision. Park's intervention changes only one thing, but that thing is the entire firing rhythm controlling Shin. Barrett cannot release the prepared arrow, while the chain pins both arms against his body. The glowing projectile stays trapped on the bow, instead of crossing the room toward Shin. Zhu's carefully purchased execution window closes before the support mage understands where the restraint originated. The Fused brothers must now choose between blocking Shin and helping the archer who protected their formation. Xiao also turns toward the interruption, dividing attention that had remained perfectly concentrated moments earlier. Shin keeps running because stopping to understand the betrayal would waste the advantage Park created. His great sword remains raised, ready to exploit the first opening these professionals have allowed. The gamble works because every enemy had watched the exposed target instead of the ally standing among them. Park timed the chain after Barrett planted his feet and committed both hands to the lethal shot. That position maximized the archer's power, but it also removed the mobility needed to avoid restraint. Shin had considered escape seconds earlier. Now retreat would abandon the person who revealed himself to help. Trust replaces hesitation, just as decades of failure taught him that isolated strength cannot solve a crisis. Park's hidden position proves the enemy formation was never as unified as its disciplined movement suggested. The mercenaries came for payment, Zhu came for a client, and Park entered with an entirely different purpose. Barrett strains against the chain, while the attack he charged remains unable to leave the bow. Zhu has not lost the battle, but he has lost the clean execution his expensive reinforcements were built around. The fused tanks still block the chamber, yet their attention is no longer fixed entirely on Shin. Shin drives into that divided moment with the same decisiveness that carried him through every earlier boss opening. He does not know Park's complete plan, but the mental warning has already proven accurate. The secret market remains a trap, although the trap player is no longer its only hidden variable. Park Young-min stands exposed among the mercenaries, holding the chain that silenced their strongest ranged attack. Shin reaches the first position from which he can protect the unexpected ally and continue resisting the ambush. For the first time since entering the underground market, Shin is no longer fighting alone.